Evan Hale had practiced 100 versions of what he would say in the Galactic conclave. He had rehearsed greetings, formal phrases, and careful diplomatic sentences that had been approved by committees, lawyers, and cultural experts. None of those plans survived the moment the doors opened. The conclave chamber was vast, larger than any building Evan had ever seen on Earth. The ceiling stretched upward like a night sky made of crystal, glowing softly with shifting colors. Floating platforms held delegates from hundreds of species. Some were tall and thin, some wide and heavy, some made of light, some made of living metal. The air itself felt alive, humming with ancient power and quiet judgment. At the center of everything sat the throne. Queen Zyrathil, the most powerful alien ruler in the known universe, rested upon it like a living myth. She was not shaped like any single species. Her form seemed to change slightly depending on who looked at her, as if each mind struggled to understand her presence. To Evan's human eyes, she appeared tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered like starlight and eyes that held entire histories. Her expression was calm, unreadable, and terrifying. Evan felt his heart race. This was the being who ruled an empire older than human civilization. The being who could erase planets with a thought. The being who had never been spoken to casually in thousands of years. The human delegation stood behind Evan, silent and pale. They had chosen him because he was calm under pressure, because he was good with words, because he understood alien psychology. At least, that was the idea. The Queen's voice echoed through the chamber without her lips moving. It was gentle, deep, and heavy with authority. "Human representative," she said, "you may speak." Just the simple human reaction to something beautiful and overwhelming. The thought formed before he could stop it, driven by excitement, nerves, and a lifetime of human instincts. "You look very sexy," Evan said. The words echoed. The universe stopped. Time seemed to freeze as the sentence drifted through the conclave. Delegates gasped in ways unique to their species. Energy fields flared. Guards moved their weapons by instinct. Some aliens collapsed in shock. Others leaned forward, waiting for punishment. The human delegation nearly fainted. Evan realized what he had said a half-second too late. His heart dropped. His face went hot. He stood frozen, unable to take the words back. The Queen did not move, her eyes focused fully on Evan. The pressure in the room increased, pressing down on every being present. This was the moment when civilizations ended. This was the moment when humans would be remembered as a short-lived mistake. Then something unexpected happened. The pressure eased. The Queen tilted her head slightly, a gesture no one had seen her make before. "Define your statement," she said. The chamber erupted into whispers and mental signals. Define? She had not ordered execution. She had not shown anger. She had asked a question. Evan swallowed. He knew he had one chance left. He straightened his posture and forced himself to breathe. Running or apologizing blindly would only make things worse. Humans survived by adapting. This was just another impossible situation. "I meant no disrespect," Evan said carefully. In human culture, saying someone looks attractive can be a form of honest admiration. It is not a claim of ownership or intent. It is simply appreciation. Attraction was controlled, regulated, or removed entirely from leadership roles. Emotion was seen as dangerous. Humans were different. "Appreciation," the Queen repeated slowly. "You looked upon me and spoke without calculation." A being made of crystal light pulsed rapidly, signaling alarm. This was not how diplomacy worked. The Queen leaned forward slightly. Her throne responded like a living thing. "No one has ever spoken to me in such a way," she said. "Not since I took this throne, not in over 8,000 cycles. Why did you not fear me? Yet you stand before gods and speak from impulse. That should have destroyed you." Weapons powered down. The immediate threat vanished, though the tension remained thick. "You will remain," the Queen said. "Your words have disrupted expected patterns. I wish to understand this, human behavior." "The human species will not be judged today by protocol alone," she declared. "They will be observed." As he walked, he felt the eyes of the galaxy on his back, some filled with anger, some with curiosity, some with fear. He reached the marked platform and stopped. The Queen looked down at him again. "You spoke of admiration," she said. "Tell me, human Evan Hale, what did you admire?" "The way everyone here reacts to you. Humans respect strength, but we admire confidence even more." She was law, power, order, not a person, not to her subjects. Something ancient stirred behind her eyes. "Your species is dangerous," she said softly. "Not because of weapons or fleets, but because you speak truths without armor." Evan hesitated, then bowed as well, slower and less deeply than the others. It was the human way. She descended until she stood before him, towering but calm. "You will teach me more," she said. "Not now, but soon." A queen had listened. The universe had changed just a little. Evan was escorted away, his mind spinning. He knew one thing with certainty. He had just lived the most dangerous sentence ever spoken by a human, and somehow it had worked. Evan Hale stepped into the quiet chamber aboard the Queen's flagship, a vessel so vast it could house entire cities. Unlike the Conclave, this ship did not hum with alien crowds, but with subtle energy, flowing through walls and floors like a river of light. Every surface shimmered as though alive, yet it was calm. The air smelled faintly metallic, clean, and unfamiliar. Here there were no spectators, no cameras, no other species to impress or intimidate. Only him and the Queen. Queen Zyrathiel stood near the central dais, her presence still overwhelming. Her figure seemed to shimmer in the soft lights, a mixture of elegance, power, and an otherworldly grace. She did not speak immediately. Instead, she observed Evan as though weighing every thought before it reached his lips. Evan felt the weight of her attention pressing down on him, not in anger but in curiosity. "You survived the conclave," she said finally. Her voice was smooth, almost musical, echoing slightly without any visible source. "And you spoke honestly. You made a gamble, human, that could have ended your species' reputation before it truly began. But humans have a habit of speaking the truth, even when it's dangerous. Sometimes it does not, but we learn from both." He knew that every word and gesture from now on mattered more than any strategy he had learned in training. One wrong move, and humanity might be judged unworthy. For the next cycle, Evan's life became a series of challenges he had not expected. The Queen was curious about everything humans did, from the simplest gestures to complex emotional responses. She asked him to demonstrate humor, empathy, courage, and problem-solving. She tested him in ways no human could have anticipated. Puzzles that required abstract thinking, simulations of crisis management, and even social scenarios that challenged his ability to influence and connect. In each test, Evan spoke honestly. He admitted fear when he felt it. He acknowledged mistakes when they occurred. He expressed admiration freely, as he had in the conclave. Every time he did, the Queen watched carefully, recording responses in ways beyond human comprehension. "What is your goal in these exercises, human?" she asked one day as they observed a simulation of a planet in turmoil. "To learn," Evan replied, "and to show you how humans solve problems, sometimes through logic, sometimes through emotion, sometimes through both." The Queen began to engage more directly, asking questions about human culture, customs, and decision-making. Evan explained the concept of friendship, of teamwork, of laughter. He described how humans celebrated life even under threat, and how they could persevere despite repeated failure. "You are illogical," the Queen said after one long discussion. "Your species should not survive this galaxy, yet you persist. Why?" Evan noticed, and he felt a quiet triumph. Not because he had impressed her, but because he had demonstrated the human way of being, honest, unafraid, and resilient. As the cycles passed, other alien delegates began to notice changes in the Queen. Her policies became less rigid, her court less fearful. She started to ask for input from her advisors rather than dictate commands. While she had always been intelligent and strategic, she had never before considered the value of open dialogue or emotional honesty. Evan had shown her a new perspective. One day, she asked him to attend a council meeting. This was unprecedented. Humans were rarely allowed near the decision-making of empires, especially this one. Yet she wanted him there, not to speak for humans directly, but to act as an example of human thought. The meeting was tense. Alien leaders argued with precision, citing data, history, and strategy. When a deadlock appeared, Evan was asked his opinion. He spoke plainly, describing the situation not in terms of conquest or authority, but in terms of collaboration and possibility. The room went silent. One by one, the leaders considered his words. His perspective was simple, human, and oddly revolutionary. "You think differently," the Queen said later, privately. "Your species sees connections we ignore. You find solutions we overlook. Sometimes being human is just noticing what's already there, but thinking differently about it." He realized that he had not only survived the first encounter with the Queen, but he had begun to influence her. Through simple human behavior, truth, humor, and admiration, he was changing how one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy thought. Yet it was not without challenges. Some members of her empire resented him. They whispered behind closed doors, questioning why the queen listened to a human at all. Some plotted to discredit or remove him. Others tried to mimic his approach, only to fail, because they lacked the sincerity and adaptability that came naturally to humans. Through it all, Evan remained steady. He learned to read alien gestures, tones, and subtle mental cues. He adapted without losing himself, and he remembered the lesson that had saved him in the conclave. Honesty and courage were human strengths, even in the face of overwhelming odds. One evening, the queen invited him to walk through the ship's gardens. They floated above a section of space, giving a view of stars and nebulae so close it felt like swimming in light. Plants from hundreds of worlds grew in carefully curated sections, some glowing, some singing, some moving with gentle life. "You appreciate beauty," she said quietly. "Even here, among your tests and trials, you notice the small things. You speak freely, act honestly, and yet survive. You make no attempt to manipulate or dominate. That is remarkable." Evan realized that she was thinking, not as a ruler, but as a being reconsidering her entire way of ruling. That human influence could reach her so profoundly felt impossible, yet it was happening. Over the next cycles, Evan's presence became a symbol, not just to the queen, but to the galaxy. Humans were small, inexperienced, and fragile. Yet they spoke boldly, acted with sincerity, and could change even the most ancient minds. Others began to send observers, curious how a species so young could wield influence without fleets, weapons, or age. For Evan, each day brought new surprises. The queen asked him to explain emotions she had never studied, to solve conflicts among her court, and to demonstrate leadership in ways humans had never attempted outside their own world. Each time he succeeded not through cunning, but through the human way, honesty, empathy, and resilience. One cycle, the queen asked a question that stunned him. "Do you fear me, human?" But fear doesn't stop us. It makes us careful, yes, but it doesn't erase who we are. Humans face fear and still act. Humanity's survival and its influence depended on his words, his honesty, and his courage. And yet somehow he felt ready. He had learned that being human was not about perfection. It was about persistence, adaptation, and the willingness to act even when the odds were impossible. By the end of the cycle, Evan had not only survived the queen's observation, he had changed her. She began to question old laws, old customs, and old assumptions. She asked more questions, sought more input, and began experimenting with new ideas inspired by humanity. Evan had shown her that strength was not only in power or fear, but in openness, courage, and authenticity. And slowly, the galaxy began to take notice. A single human, speaking honestly and acting with courage, had begun to shift the balance of thought in an empire older than the stars. Evan Hale woke to the soft hum of the Queen's flagship moving through the void of space. Unlike the chaos of the conclave or the tense observation periods in the court, this morning felt calm. But calm was deceptive. Every day brought a new test, a new challenge, or a new chance to prove humanity's worth. Evan had learned that survival among the stars did not come from weapons, wealth, or fleets, but from honesty, courage, and the willingness to act with intelligence and integrity. Today was one of those days. The Queen had summoned him to the Central Strategy Chamber, a place where her advisors and generals gathered to decide the fate of entire systems. Evan had never been in a room so full of beings whose minds worked on scales beyond human comprehension. He looked around. Some had multiple heads, others had shifting bodies, and one appeared almost completely made of liquid energy. All of them were brilliant, cunning, and used to ruling without question. Evan knew he was the anomaly. He was the human. The Queen greeted him with her usual calm intensity. "Human," she said, her voice echoing in the chamber without moving her lips. "Today you will witness a problem. You may also offer a solution if you can." He had learned that showing fear or excitement openly could give the wrong impression. Humans were small and young in the galaxy, but he had to act with the confidence that his species deserved. The Queen waved her hand, and a holographic map appeared in the center of the room. It displayed a small star system on the edge of her empire. Planets were marked with symbols indicating distress, conflict, or instability. The problem was immediately clear. A newly discovered intelligent species, the Larek, had begun to fight among themselves, threatening the stability of the entire system. Past civilizations had tried to intervene and failed. They had either sided with one faction or imposed harsh rules, and both approaches had led to rebellion and destruction. "This system will fall into chaos within cycles," said one of the Queen's advisors, a being whose skin shimmered with metallic colors. All previous attempts to manage such conflict have ended in failure. Intervention is considered too risky. He continued, humans often solve conflicts by talking, not fighting, by understanding motivations, building trust, and finding shared goals. Maybe that can be applied here. First, we need to understand each faction, their fears, their needs, what they want from each other. Then we create a situation where they can see that cooperation benefits everyone. Humans call it negotiation. It requires honesty and trust, and sometimes patience. Patience is a tool, not a weakness. If you force solutions, you create rebellion. If you build understanding, you create stability. It may take longer, but it lasts. You can crush a civilization, but you cannot make it loyal by fear alone. Humans have survived because we act honestly, and others learn to rely on us. Very well, the Queen said at last. You will lead the observation and planning for this system. Your species will be tested not by battle, but by diplomacy. We will see if your methods can succeed where others have failed. But he did not feel fear in the paralyzing sense. He felt determination. This was exactly the kind of challenge humans were designed for. The first step was to send communication probes to the Laric factions. Evan instructed them to convey not commands or threats, but questions. What did they want? What did they fear? What was important to them? The responses came slowly at first, then more rapidly as the factions began to realize that no one was judging or threatening them. A human voice, even filtered through the Queen's advanced translation systems, carried a subtle honesty that few alien species had encountered. Evan compiled the responses and identified patterns. The factions were divided, yes, but they shared common concerns: access to resources, protection from unknown threats, and recognition of their sovereignty. They had been fighting not because of hatred, but because no one had taken the time to understand what they truly valued. This is typical human insight, one advisor muttered under his breath, but loud enough for Evan to hear. Observing before acting. I cannot take your lands or force you to act. I am here to listen and to help you find solutions that benefit everyone. If you speak honestly, you will be understood. He asked questions, repeated points for clarity, and acknowledged concerns without judgment. His honesty and patience began to break through the initial hostility. By the third cycle, small breakthroughs emerged. One faction agreed to share resources temporarily in exchange for assurances of sovereignty. Another faction realized that their previous approach had been based on fear of the unknown, not true malice. Every small success built trust. The Queen observed silently at first, but she began asking questions, genuinely curious. Why do you allow them to speak freely? She asked one day. Because humans understand that listening is stronger than forcing, Evan replied. If they feel heard, they are more likely to cooperate. Skirmishes diminished, agreements were signed, and factions began to respect each other's boundaries. Where previous civilizations had failed with force, Evan had succeeded with understanding. The Queen finally spoke to him privately. You have done what no other civilization could. You have stabilized a system without war, without coercion, and without fleets. You have shown that your species is remarkable. The Queen had recognized something fundamental about humanity. Courage was not measured by firepower or control, but by honesty, adaptability, and the willingness to act for what is right. But the challenge was not over. While the Laric system had been stabilized, word of humanity's methods spread quickly. Other species began to watch, some with curiosity, some with suspicion. Not all accepted human approaches immediately. Many believed that compassion and honesty were weaknesses. Evan understood that every victory would now be scrutinized. He also realized something more profound. Humans had a unique role in the galaxy. They could teach older civilizations a new way of thinking. They could change minds not with power, but with example. One human, speaking honestly, could alter the course of an empire. And one day, that influence could extend even further, perhaps to the edges of the universe itself. Evan reflected on the first time he had spoken to the Queen in the conclave, the words that had almost ended him, the impulsive, honest sentence that revealed human admiration. That single moment had begun a chain of events leading to this system's stabilization. Humanity's strength was in being human, daring, honest, and unpredictable. By the end of the cycle, Evan felt a quiet pride. Not personal pride, but the pride of a species that had shown resilience, intelligence, and heart. He had navigated alien cultures, stabilized a system, and influenced the thoughts of one of the most powerful beings in existence. The Queen summoned him again. "Human," she said, her voice softer now, tinged with something like approval, "the galaxy will watch you closely. You have begun a new way of thinking. Your species is no longer a curiosity. You are a teacher, a guide, and a challenge to what we have always believed. To act with honesty and courage." Evan looked out of the viewport at the distant stars, feeling the magnitude of what had been achieved. One species, small and young, had begun to teach an empire that spanned galaxies a lesson that would ripple for cycles to come. The galaxy was changing, and humans were at the center of that change. Not through fear, not through force, but through being human. Evan Hale awoke to the quiet hum of the Queen's flagship, but the calm he had grown used to felt different today. A subtle tension filled the air, like the moment before a storm. Word of humanity's success in the Lyric system had spread rapidly through the galaxy. Delegates, observers, and envoys from countless civilizations were now watching the Queen's court more closely than ever, curious to see if humans could truly influence a being who had ruled for thousands of cycles. Evan knew that observation alone was not enough. He had to continue proving that humans could make a difference, not through fleets or weapons, but through their unique abilities to adapt, communicate, and inspire trust. The Queen greeted him in the central chamber. Her presence, as always, was overwhelming, but Evan had learned to hold his focus. "Human," she said, her voice calm yet commanding, "the galaxy reacts to your actions. Many are inspired, some are concerned, others are suspicious. Not just for survival, but for influence. The galaxy will observe your next actions closely. You cannot fail." Reports came from multiple star systems. Several had begun to show signs of unrest similar to the Lyric system, though on a larger scale. Entire sectors were teetering on the edge of collapse due to misunderstandings, fear, and miscommunication. Where previous civilizations had attempted to impose order with strict rules or military intervention, Evans saw an opportunity to apply humanity's principles again: observation, honesty, and collaboration. The Queen summoned her council. "You will lead the coordination," she said. "Your approach must be tested across multiple systems simultaneously. The risks are great. If you fail, the consequences will ripple farther than before. Do not assume power can solve everything," he reminded them. "We must understand what each species values. We must build trust before we build solutions." Many civilizations had never seen a leader who valued understanding over dominance. Some attempted to manipulate or test him, expecting the human approach to fail. Evan responded with patience. He acknowledged mistakes, corrected misunderstandings openly, and maintained transparency. Slowly, systems began to stabilize. Factions that had fought for generations started cooperating, forming agreements that benefited all parties. Leaders reported that the human methods felt unfamiliar but effective. "There is a logic here," one alien diplomat said, "that transcends power or intimidation." She asked questions, challenged his strategies, and occasionally suggested alternatives, but she allowed him to act freely. "You have shown me that influence is not force," she said during one private meeting. "You have taught me to see the value of honesty, patience, and understanding. Your species is remarkable. But we learn and we act. That is what matters." Despite the challenges, Evan remained focused. He understood that humans had a role no other species could fulfill. They could teach others to communicate, to compromise, and to see value in collaboration. They could change the galaxy not by conquest, but by example. One cycle, a particularly tense situation, arose in a system where two civilizations had been at odds for centuries. The conflict had escalated to the point of potential annihilation. Evan coordinated a meeting between the leaders, using the Queen's advanced translation systems to bridge language and cultural gaps. He encouraged them to speak openly, to admit fears and misunderstandings, and to identify shared goals. The meeting was difficult. Old grudges surfaced and tempers flared, but Evan remained calm. He acknowledged their concerns, asked clarifying questions, and reminded them of the benefits of cooperation. Slowly, the leaders began to see that their conflicts were not inevitable. They discovered common ground, shared needs, and mutual respect. Agreements were formed and tensions eased. The Queen observed the progress with fascination. "Your species acts with courage and honesty," she said. "You take risks that others would avoid. You speak truths that many fear to acknowledge. That is your strength." Systems that had been on the brink of collapse stabilized. Alliances formed not through coercion or fear, but through understanding and trust. Other civilizations began to adopt human-inspired methods, recognizing that cooperation could achieve results that force and intimidation could not. Despite these successes, challenges remained. Some leaders resisted, clinging to old methods of control and dominance. Some attempted to manipulate situations, testing humanity's approach to its limits. Evan faced each obstacle with patience and honesty, demonstrating that human resilience and adaptability could overcome even deeply entrenched skepticism. The Queen continued to mentor him, offering insights into strategy, diplomacy, and governance. Together, they refined human methods for use across the galaxy, blending honesty and empathy with the Queen's advanced understanding of political systems. Evan realized that humans were not just influencing the galaxy, they were shaping it, guiding it toward a future where communication, trust, and collaboration mattered as much as power. One evening, as Evan walked through the gardens of the flagship, the Queen joined him. The stars stretched infinitely beyond the glass walls, and the plants from countless worlds glowed softly in the dim light. "You have done more than I imagined possible," she said. "Your species has changed the course of civilizations without fleets, without weapons, without coercion. One human, speaking honestly and acting with courage, can influence more than entire fleets." Humans had become a symbol of possibility, showing that even the youngest civilizations could influence empires, stabilize systems, and inspire change. Evan understood that the next cycles would bring more challenges, but he also knew that humanity was ready. With each new system stabilized, each leader influenced, and each misunderstanding resolved, the Queen and the galaxy began to see what humans had always known, that courage, honesty, and persistence could achieve what fear and power could not. And as Evan looked out at the stars, he realized that humanity's journey had only just begun. The universe was vast, full of challenges and unknowns. But humans were ready to meet them, not with fleets, not with weapons, but with the qualities that had always made them survive: heart, mind, and courage. The Queen turned to him. "You have done well, human. You have proven that influence does not come from domination, but from understanding. That is a lesson the galaxy must learn. We will continue to act honestly, to adapt, and to connect. That is what humans do, and that is how we survive." What had once seemed like an impossible expanse of danger and uncertainty now felt like a map of opportunities. Humanity's journey, from a small, young species on a fragile planet, to this moment, at the center of galactic attention, had been shaped by courage, honesty, and a refusal to be underestimated. The events of the past cycles had proven to the galaxy that humans were more than their size and age. They were innovators, problem solvers, and a source of unexpected influence. The Queen approached silently, her presence as commanding and graceful as ever. "Human," she said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of centuries of experience, "your species has done what many thought impossible. You have not conquered, you have not dominated, yet your influence now stretches across more systems than any fleet could reach. And yet your efforts have changed more than just the systems you touched. Entire civilizations now watch, listen, and sometimes emulate your ways. Your species is becoming a standard by which others measure success, not in war or conquest, but in understanding, cooperation, and resilience." Humans had always survived against impossible odds by relying on ingenuity, honesty, and perseverance. Now, those same qualities had begun to influence empires older than the stars themselves. He realized that humanity's role in the galaxy was not to dominate or rule, but to guide and inspire. Across multiple sectors, reports arrived of systems stabilizing faster than expected. Civilizations that had been on the brink of collapse were learning to communicate openly, negotiate, and work together. Factions that once fought for centuries were discovering mutual interests, forming alliances, and creating solutions that respected each culture's needs. Humanity's methods, simple yet effective, were proving that influence could grow through example rather than force. The Queen summoned Evan to lead a council meeting, unprecedented in its scope. Delegates from dozens of species gathered, each curious to witness the human approach firsthand. Some were skeptical, certain that empathy and honesty could not manage interstellar crises. Others were intrigued, having heard of the Larek system and other stabilized regions. Evan addressed the council with confidence, speaking plainly and directly. "I am human," he began, "and I cannot force any of you to act in a certain way. I have no armies here. I cannot control your systems. What I can do is help you understand each other, communicate openly, and find solutions that benefit everyone. If we work together, we can solve problems that have lasted for cycles. He emphasized collaboration, compromise, and transparency. Over the next cycles, breakthroughs occurred. Civilizations that had resisted engagement began to participate in open dialogues. Leaders who had once relied on strict rules or intimidation discovered the value of listening. Agreements were formed, conflicts de-escalated, and systems stabilized. In many cases, solutions emerged that no single species could have devised alone. The human approach, rooted in honesty, adaptability, and courage, was proving to be a catalyst for positive change across the galaxy. The Queen watched Evan's progress with fascination. "You are not like any species I have encountered," she said. "You act without the guarantee of success, yet your actions ripple farther than fleets or weapons. Your influence is subtle but immense. Those qualities matter more than size or strength when the goal is lasting change." The galaxy was slowly learning that influence could grow from honesty, empathy, and the courage to speak openly, even in the presence of the most powerful rulers. One day, the Queen called Evan to a private chamber overlooking a star cluster ablaze with color and light. "You have done more than I imagined possible," she said. "Your species has stabilized systems, influenced civilizations, and reshaped perspectives. But your greatest achievement is not in any single success. It is in the proof that the young and small can affect the vast and powerful. That is your legacy." Humanity had faced extinction on its home planet, survived countless challenges, and now stood at the center of galactic attention. Yet he knew that this was only the beginning. There were still systems in turmoil, species resistant to change, and conflicts that had persisted for cycles. Humanity's influence had begun, but it would require continued courage, honesty, and creativity to sustain. "We will continue," he said finally. "Humans do not stop acting. We will keep learning, connecting, and solving problems. That is what makes us human. That is how we survive. And through your persistence, the galaxy has learned a lesson many civilizations never grasp. That strength is not always in power or domination, but in the courage to act honestly, the wisdom to listen, and the willingness to adapt. Humanity has become a teacher, not through fleets or weapons, but through example." Humans were small, fragile, and inexperienced, yet they had qualities that even the oldest empires could not ignore. They had proven that empathy, honesty, and courage could influence civilizations and stabilize systems in ways that traditional power could not. News of humanity's successes spread across the galaxy. Some species were inspired, adopting human-inspired methods of cooperation and communication. Others were cautious, wary of a species that could wield influence without traditional tools of power. But all observed, learned, and began to reconsider what strength truly meant. The Queen called a final council, bringing together representatives from dozens of systems. Evan addressed them once more, speaking plainly and confidently. "You have seen what can be accomplished when we act with honesty, courage, and a willingness to understand each other. Humans are small, but we persist. We are young, but we learn quickly. We do not rely on fear or domination to achieve results. And through these actions, we can create a galaxy where cooperation, respect, and understanding are valued as much as power." The Queen spoke last, her voice carrying through the chamber. "This human has shown us that one small, honest, courageous species can influence the galaxy in ways that fleets and armies cannot. You have stabilized systems, inspired cooperation, and proven that the young can teach the old. Humanity will not be underestimated again." Not for personal achievement, but for the species he represented. Humans had survived against impossible odds, adapted to challenges beyond comprehension, and now stood as a beacon of courage, honesty, and influence across the galaxy. Looking out at the stars, Evan realized that the universe was vast, full of mysteries, conflicts, and possibilities. Yet humanity had shown that even the smallest species could have an impact, that courage and honesty could ripple farther than weapons, and that persistence and adaptability could change civilizations. And so, humanity's journey continued, not through conquest or fear, but through heart, mind, and courage. One human had influenced an empire, guided systems to stability, and reminded the galaxy that strength was not only in size or power, but in the qualities that made them human. The galaxy watched. The stars shone brightly. And humans, small and young, continued to act, to learn, and to influence the universe in ways no one had imagined. Evan smiled, knowing that the story of humanity, honest, courageous, adaptable, had only just begun.